When you hear the name Larry Hama, his decades-long tenure on his seminal work G.I. Joe likely come to mind first. Larry enjoyed a successful career even before Jim Shooter first came to his office at Marvel and asked about doing a licensed property for Hasbro. After a stint with the Army, Larry worked on Underground Comics, and with Wally Wood and DC Comics before landing a gig with Neal Adams' Continuity Associates and later Continuity Comics. And it was there, in the 1970s, when a little anthropomorphic rabbit was born. That was 1974. Larry created Bucky O'Hare from the ground up, he says. His storytelling style was influenced, though, by Carl Barks and his Uncle Scrooge stories. In fact, Larry says he got into comics in the first place so he could draw funny animals. His other inspiration was, of course, Wally Wood. So much so that Hama calls it a Woody tribute piece. In 1977, Hama was an editor at DC Comics when the publisher requested ideas for a brand new creator-owned line, which would be, it turns out, the DC Explosion. Larry took that percolating Bucky idea and combined it with another he was working on called Newts, a story about kids fighting alien toads in a post-apocalyptic landscape, and submitted Buck Bunny. But contracts became an issue, so Larry sat on the idea for a while and remained unsubmitted long enough to be a victim of the DC implosion. Al Milgrom, who'd submitted his own Firestorm, by the way, for that effort, were the first two editors laid off from DC. Hama met up with Neal Adams, who liked the Bucky idea, and he said he would print it. They'd planned on Hama writing and penciling the book while Adams would ink it and publish it. That is until Michael Golden showed up with his amazing art portfolio. In one interview, Hama adds, "I actually put the whole thing together and designed all the toys around 1978 or so. It took many years to generate the art for the first comic." When Adams took the book with him to Germany, one guy commented that Buck Bunny sounds too much like Bugs Bunny. Later, Neal Adams was with his wife Marilyn, and while at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, they saw a sign that said O'Hare. So Marilyn turned to Neal and said, "O'Hare is a rabbit too. How about that for a last name?" And so Bucky O'Hare was fully formed. O'Hare, by the way, is named after Lieutenant Commander Edward Buck O'Hare, the United States Navy's first Medal of Honor recipient. It was all fitting together. That first comic featuring Bucky O'Hare would turn out to be 1984's Echo of Future Past. At the same time, Neal was putting plans together for a television show, a toy line, licensing, the works. Adams even co-wrote the Bucky theme song from the animated series along with Doug Kataros. They quickly made $3 million, and then, as Neal Adams remembers it, Hasbro pulled the plug because they'd screwed up distribution. Bucky's first story was collected in 1986 into a graphic novel. In another interview, Hama says the graphic novel as printed was supposed to be the first half of a two-part story. "I actually wrote the whole story as a screenplay. I wrote the script for the second graphic novel based on the screenplay, and it resolves everything from the first one and gets Willie back home." Michael Golden drew most of the second graphic novel, but Continuity Publishing went under before it came out. When the Bucky O'Hare and the Toad Wars cartoon debuted in 1991, the comics were again re-released as a limited series. Only 5 of 6 issues were published, leaving it incomplete, likely due, again, to Hasbro's missteps. Bucky also got a video game from Nintendo and an arcade game from Konami. He also had an entire action figure line. Hama and Golden say they designed all the characters as toys first. That's why everything matches exactly. To quote Hama, "Michael Golden, Neal Adams, and I designed a whole second season worth of figures and vehicles for the toy line. If that second wave had been produced, it would have included Bucky O'Hare with Spacewalk Lifeline, Jenny, Rumblebee, Sly Lizard, Kamikaze Kamo, Total Terror Toad, Pit Stop Pete, and vehicles like the Battle Bucket and even the Righteous Indignation playset. Complex Digger McSquint and others were being prototyped for a third wave when they were shut down because, again, Hasbro. The line that was released in 1991 included 10 figures and 2 vehicles. Neal Adams and Continuity retained overall rights to Bucky, while both Hama and Golden received percentages. And because of that, Hama's influence over other media was nominal. In the United Kingdom, Scottish media outlet DC Thomson reprinted Bucky's stories, along with printing Hama's missing 6th issue, and they put out more. In fact, the series in the United Kingdom lasted until issue 20. So who is he? He's Bucky O'Hare, the captain of the Righteous Indignation space vessel. Bucky came into prominence on a planet called Rigel II, culling the Great Clone Uprising while battling giant cyber spiders. His action figure file card, called a space security file here, says that this was when he was part of the United Animals of the Aniverse Space Service. Bucky was a war hero, receiving a bronze furball with zinc palms commendation for his work, quelling another uprising by the mutant weasels of the vegan slug lords. Bucky's also a Knight of of the Silver Carrot, with his file card building that out a bit more to Knight Commander of the Secret and Glorious Galactic Order of the Silver Carrot. That combination gave him access to an unlimited lifetime supply of vintage purple-colored carrots. The story's rounded out with a fully formed cast and crew as well. Jenny is Bucky's love interest and the pilot of the Righteous Indignation. Jenny's an Aldebaran cat with psychic powers. She's a member of a highly secretive mystic order of Aldebaran witches. The red jewels on her uniform give her a direct link to her powers and to her ancient order of witches. Deadeye Duck is the captain's gunner's mate and wields a maser gun which amplifies microwaves by stimulating radiation emission. Deadeye was once a space pirate with the Corsair Canards of Canopus 3, which is where he honed his skills with the maser gun. He worked as a mercenary during the Great Clone Uprising and then battled post-adolescent android tortoises, not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, in the Weasel Wars of the sleazoid planet of Sludge. He'd been decorated for gallantry, including space gunnery and invective metal, along with the oak leaf cluster for vituperative vehemence. Willie DeWitt is another shipmate, the acting engineering officer, and Willie wields a digitally activated low-pressure H2O pistol, a water gun. Willie, it turns out, is a 10-year-old human boy from another dimension in a city called San Francisco. Bruce is the chief engineer first class aboard the Righteous Indignation. He's won Baboon of the Month several times and has become something of a legend among mammal and toad alike. AFC, or Android First Class Blinky, is the ship's droid, though officially he's the science and technology officer. He's called a Type 3 Charlie compact multi-purpose utility droid. His advanced electronics suite and AI systems allow for multi-role functionality. Bucky has a friend in Commander Dogstar, who's the captain of another ship, the frigate named the Indefatigable. The third captain in the story is Mimi LaFleur, and she captains the Screaming Mimi. In an interesting commentary on social dynamics, environmental issues, colonization, and consumerism, there was once a planet of toads that spent all their time buying cheap goods at high prices. To allow them to focus on just that task alone, they even built a massive supercomputer that could handle their day-to-day activities. Well, that computer became more and more powerful, and at a certain point, the computer took control of the planet, renaming itself Complex, and, as supreme dictator, turned the entire planet into a serpentine global factory 7 layers deep. Complex built an army and an entire armada of space vessels to steal and plunder from the cosmos. There's motherships, slave ships, double bubble fighters, battle cruisers that soften up targets, storm toads to mop up after the cruiser's orbital bombardment, and then magma tankers to come in after that to suck up the molten planetary cores for use by Complex. Complex made Toad stormtroopers and cyborg toads, putting in place a supreme high commander of all Toad forces named Toadborg. There's also a mercenary named Alligator, an alligator, that shows up in some stories, along with a Toad air marshal who's supreme high August commander of Complex's 23rd Reinforced Planetary Assault Armada. Complex's wanton expansionism was met with opposition by the United Animal Security Council, who formed SPACE, or the Sentient Protoplasm Against Colonial Encroachment. When the story begins in Echo of Future Past, Bucky and his crew are being pursued in the Righteous Indignation by the Toads. Bucky ordered their warp drive activated. AFC Blinky and Chief Engineer Bruce, the Beetlejuicean Berserker Baboon, reported it inoperable due to a malfunction with the photon accelerator. They'd sustained massive damage from the barrage of plasma cannon strikes from the Toads. Another strike hit the ship, and Bruce was killed. Jenny yelled they had to warp out of there right away or they'd be destroyed. With no more options, Bucky activated the warp drive, cranking it to max power. And it just so happens that in another place in space-time, in another dimension, at that exact same time, young Willie activated the photon accelerator that he had built in his bedroom at the time, at home. His room was plunged into darkness and cloaked in a force field with the consistency of week-old raspberry gelatin. When he opened the door to his room, he realized he'd been transported across space and time, right on to the Righteous Indignation. Bucky called Willie a giant, pink, half-shaved berserker baboon. Now they had someone who knew their way around a photon accelerator to repair the ship's drive, since Bruce had been KIA, which would allow them to escape from their Toad pursuers. Willie worked on his own drive in his room with help from Bucky and Deadeye, while Jenny kept the photon bridge open between realities. AFC Blinky opened the door and said he had to turn off the machine to make the door disappear so that they wouldn't get captured. He reported that Toad stormtroopers had boarded their ship and took Jenny prisoner. On the way to rescue Jenny, Willie learned about the rise of Complex and the Toad threat. They came across one of those behemoth-class Toad magma tankers trying to siphon magma from a nearby planetoid. Inside the tanker, Jenny used her witch magic on her captors. Bucky's crew infiltrated the Toad ship, and they were met with a legion of Storm Toad death commandos. Then, with Bruce's old spacesuit on, Willie continued to fight the Toads. The air marshal dispatched Void Droid to attack the suited human, but Willie was able to defeat it with his water gun. Willie, Deadeye, and Jenny were then able to commandeer a double bubble and escape the tanker. It turns out that a mouse had imagined the planetoid and and when it vanished, the magma tanker was destroyed. That's when Willie's parents deactivated the device he had in his bedroom still, closing the photon bridge and trapping Willie in Bucky's realm. Bucky said Willie could join his crew, that if he helps croak some toads, they'll help him find a way home. And then we get to the UK continuation. In issue 7, Toad's air marshal took Warren, Bucky's home planet, and enslaved all the rabbits and hares living there. After Bucky liberated a slave ship, he learned of this, and somehow Willie got back to Earth, but then decided to go back to join Bucky, partly to help, partly to escape from some bullies. The slave ship, which was now under Hare control, headed to the planet named Genus. Bucky had to go before the council to request more soldiers and equipment for the war, but the council wasn't convinced that the Toads were the threat Bucky knew them to be. It was there that he also met Bruce's brother, Bruiser, and Bruiser joined their crew. The righteous indignation plotted a course for Bucky's home planet of Warren, who'd by now been terraformed by the Toads into a planet-wide swamp. Good for Toads, not so much for hares. They also uncovered a Toad plot to take Genus and fell the Animal Council. Bucky and Jenny had to fight more Toads who tried to ambush them, but they were defeated. Bucky and his crew then headed out to save Genus, while Toadborg dispatched Alligator to get access codes for Genus, so they could begin their invasion. Meanwhile, the council commissioned Commander Sirius Dogstar and his vessel the Indefatigable to help Bucky. Bucky accidentally hired the Alligator mercenary, who ended up stealing the access codes to Genus. Bucky and Jenny figured out his plan though and chased him aboard another Toad tanker, running into Toadborg for the first time. Their plan went to hell when Willie fell down a shaft, and most of the team were at Toadborg's mercy while Deadeye had to deal with the Toad troopers. The Indefatigable came in to save the day while Willie destroyed the original codes and Jenny freed the crew with her magic powers. Toadborg kept fighting the crew though, through it all. Bucky was able to hold off Toadborg while the satellites around Genus activated, repelling the Toad attack. In issue 15, the Toads attacked Bucky's ship and it crashed, and they happened to crash on a planet with an illegal shipping outpost on it run by baboons. By the time Willie came back from Earth, he brought with him schematics and blueprints for an aircraft carrier, and Bucky realized that they could use that. So Jenny took them to meet someone named Pitstop Pete, and it was Pitstop Pete, the aptly named mechanic, who set about building Willie's aircraft carrier. But then the Toads attacked the ship again, a squadron of Toad fighters blasting them, while Pete also worked on the propulsion system on their vessel. They were able to escape Toadborg's attack and headed to meet with Captain Mimi LaFleur, captain of the Screaming Mimi, at the Fruit Chewy warehouse. In their meeting, Pete informed Mimi that he was building a aircraft carrier and he wanted Digger McSquint, her gunner, to be his gunner on the new vessel. Meanwhile, Complex was laying into Toadborg for his failures. Little did he know Toadborg was plotting to take over the Toad Empire, a coup de Toad, if you will. So Toadborg's Toad army attacked the Fruit Chewy warehouse but were repelled by the mammals and Digger McSquint's own android named Rumblebee, and Rumblebee was the one who shot Toadborg. In the penultimate issue, the Magic Mouse came back and talked with Bucky, showing him how Toadborg was trying to take over from Complex but has failed so far. Then later Jenny came to Bucky to say she had to go back to her own planet. A plot by Jenny was afoot. They all went to her home planet of Aldebaran and met with Mother Superior when they arrived. She gave some sensors to them to help out with their mission. Oh, and they were now using the Screaming Mimi ship since the Righteous Indignation had crashed, and they also had both Pete and Mimi now on the crew. She also said the Toads might try to attack Willie's homeworld, Earth. Upon leaving, Toadborg and his Toads attacked and managed to severely damage Blinky. Jenny and Pete defeated Toadborg, but not before he was able to probe Willie's mind. And so the tale of Bucky O'Hare came to an end. These UK stories, by the way, were written by Peter Stone. These additional stories largely aligned with the animated series. That series, though, starts with the Toads taking over Warren and install the climate converter. Willie linked up with Bucky, and they go to Genus, the Aniverse capital world, while the Toads were trying to get access codes. In On the Blink, the Toads took over a koala world and prevented mammals from getting in, so it became Blinky's mission to shut down the defense system. Later, Bucky had to go to the Toad Empire to shut down Toad TV and Complex. In the search for Bruce came back, but he was a ghost. Later, Toadborg kidnapped Princess Felicia, who was Jenny's Padawan, or student. In The Warriors, the Toad Air Marshal sought to regain honor by invading Deadeye's home planet of Canopus 3. In episode 12, the Toads then invaded Bruiser's homeworld, which is when Bucky and his team ran into the Terror Toad. In the last episode, Jenny's captured by the Toads, and Toadborg wanted to trade her for the climate change device that the mammals had captured. Now there were two climate change devices, the one that they had taken and the one the Toads replaced it with, which was still on Warren. Bucky went to meet with Toadborg, but the Toads captured him and his crew. Except that was a fake Bucky. It was Bucky's cousin in disguise. And the real Bucky, along with his friend Captain Dogstar, showed up and attacked the Toads. They were then able to escape, and they took the climate converter with them. They then went to Warren to destroy the new converter there, and that's when they were attacked by Complex. They won while the Hares used the converter to turn their planet back into a forest for themselves. Remember I said there was a plot afoot by Jenny? Well, this was all part of Jenny's plan, and it worked. And everyone lived happily ever after. In 1998, DJ Clausen created a fan-made web series that intended to pick up where the last official official season left off. That ran for 4 seasons, with the final appearing in January of 2011. In 2006, Adams released Bucky Comics in a manga format with some expanded content, but was mostly the same reprinted stories in black and white. There was also a CG pilot made and a licensing deal with Shocker Toys, neither of which lasted, and that's when Boss Fight Studios stepped in. The new line was announced by BFS in 2016, but as of early 2022, no longer held the license for Bucky O'Hare. And then in April of 2022, comic book legend and icon Neal Adams passed away. So what the future holds for old Bucky O'Hare remains to be seen. Hama's creation spawned an entire comic book trope in the anthropomorphic rabbit niche. 1984's Amazing Heroes 51 says this work by Marvel's Conan the Barbarian editor is humans meets funny animals that resembles a collision between George Lucas and Walt Disney, with traces of Terry Gilliam's movie Time Bandits and Marshall Rogers' Captain Quick and a Foozle, which were both produced after Bucky was made but before it was published. The article also notes that the series features a healthy infusion of the brand of Wally Wood nuttiness Hama patented while serving as editor of Marvel's Crazy magazine. Alright, that's a wrap on this one, my friends. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.